creation of children. Now, my brothers and sisters, I come to what may be one of the most common and overlooked sins against God's plan. And that is artificial contraception, also called artificial birth control, and its permanent form, which is to have oneself voluntarily sterilized. Both of these, contraception and sterilization, deliberately frustrate the purposes of the marital act. They seek to exclude children from the act, and in doing so they also contradict the unity of the spouses. Now, Pope John Paul II talked about this in what he called the language of the body. In the language of the body, in genuine marital love, what is said is, I love you. I give myself totally to you. I am yours. What is said in contraceptive sex is, I love you, but. I love you, but I do not want a child with you at this time. I love you, but right now I'm more interested in what you're going to give me. There is no but in true love. If we want to know what true love is all about, all we have to do, my brothers and sisters, is to gaze upon a crucifix. Because that is the image of what true self-giving love is all about. Jesus Christ gave himself totally for us, pouring out even the last drop of his precious blood for us. And the love of marriage is to be an image of that love that Christ has for us, his bride, the church. God established marriage. God has the right to teach us what the purpose of marriage is, and what is right and what is wrong, even in the area of marital sexuality. Now, this teaching against artificial birth control is not a new teaching. In fact, it goes back to the earliest days of God's people. In the book of Genesis, in chapter 38, there was a man named Onan. And Onan did not want to raise up a son for his brother who had died, which was the Jewish law. And Onan, it says, wasted his seed upon the ground. And God struck him dead, for he did a detestable thing. Now, there have been some modern scripture scholars who've said things like, well, Onan's real sin was Onan was selfish. Well, Onan's father and brother were also selfish. But Onan was the only one who was struck dead because he wasted the seed. In the early church, the question of birth control came up because the ancient Greeks are the ones who had invented the condom. And as these Greeks were converting to Christianity, they wanted to know, could they continue some of their practices? And the early church said no. We have the writings of two of the apostolic fathers. One, the Didache, which I mentioned the other night. Another one called the Apostolic Constitutions of Hippolytus. Both condemn the use of birth control. Even at the time of the Protestant revolt, every one of the Protestant leaders rejected artificial birth control. Luther, Calvin, Zwingli, and Knox all rejected it. Calvin, in fact, called it murder. The murder of a child before it had a chance to live. The first time that a Christian denomination allowed its members to use birth control was in 1930. There are people in this church tonight who remember the year 1930. It's not that long ago. It was the Church of England at its Lambeth Conference. And immediately Pope Pius XI came out with an encyclical condemning that decision, reaffirming what Christianity had always taught on openness to the gift of life. The secular organization that has most pushed birth control is Planned Parenthood. It was started by a woman named Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger was a racist bigot who believed that certain races, namely blacks, Jews, Eastern Europeans, the Irish, and others, were inferior races. She wanted to work to keep the Aryan race on top. She admired Adolf Hitler and his eugenic work. She believed that these other races were simply inferior peoples, and she promoted birth control and sterilization and abortion for those races so as to suppress them. To this day, Planned Parenthood has a disproportionately high number of their abortion clinics in black and Hispanic neighborhoods. 1 out of every 3 African American babies conceived in this country is aborted largely due to Planned Parenthood. My brothers and sisters, there is a racism that is still going on with this. And as followers of Christ, we reject all forms of racism. But we see why she was promoting this. And we see even today that Planned Parenthood is doing things like, we found out a few years ago, in Costa Rica and in some of the Central American countries, they were taking Catholic women from the villages against their will and sterilizing them against their will. They defend the one-child policy of Communist China. They have no problem with it. They've never protested it. Even though mostly it is girls who are being aborted or killed by infanticide. And they're supposedly for women's rights. It is a lie. Now, my brothers and sisters, there was a lot of confusion on this back in the 60s. A lot of people thought that the church was going to change her teaching. And I'm sorry if any of you were confused during that time. In 1968, Pope Paul VI came out with a letter called Humanae Vitae, of human life. And in that letter, he upheld the church's teaching on openness to the gift of life and predicted that if artificial birth control became widespread, we would see the following. We would see a spread of marital infidelity and a general lowering of moral standards. We would see men losing their reverence for women and regarding them as merely as objects for their own pleasure. We would see governments seeking to impose contraception on their people. That from these we would see a breakdown of marriage and family and more widespread abuse of women and children. My brothers and sisters, everything Pope Paul VI predicted would happen has happened to the very letter. He was very prophetic. It is a proven fact that couples who use artificial birth control have a divorce rate of around 50%. Couples who remain open to the gift of life, who regulate their size of their family through natural family planning, which is entirely natural, entirely drug-free, and entirely approved by the church when done with the right motivation, have a divorce rate of less than 4%. 1 in 2 chance of ending in divorce versus 1 in 25. That itself should tell us something.